A quick thanks to MSI for sending us here this year. We would not be at Computex without them. And also thank you to lynda.com. So, the Bulldog. A lot of you guys probably already have opinions about this system, to be completely honest. It's been quite covered so far, and we're on day 1 of Computex. Pretty ridiculous, but I guess that's kind of Corsair's whole thing. Now, looking at the Bulldog from the outside, I think everyone and their mom has an opinion about how they probably don't like how it looks. I'm sure there's a few out there that do like it, but I'm not necessarily in that camp either. I had some flashbacks of a crab. The crab logo came to mind. It looked like a very wide crab, and I didn't like it. But it doesn't really matter. They're going to be designing more outside cases, and that's why sitting next to me here is more just the inner framing of the Bulldog, what actually really matters right now. There will be changes to this as well, but the main changes are probably going to be happening to the outside. You're probably going to see a much more muted design, but we'll have to stay tuned and find out how that goes. Another thing to note is that the config can change. Now, whatever vendor you buy it from will have their own config, so Newegg or NCX or whoever the heck will have their own set of components within the Bulldog chassis, but Corsair will offer it with the chassis, an SF600 power supply, a not yet determined motherboard, and an H5SF CPU cooler. Said motherboard will be decided much closer to the release date of Skylake, so stay tuned for that. That CPU cooler, though, is freaking cool. It has a freaking tiny rad. You can actually see it right here. It's just the exposed metal kind of showing part and then across under the plastic right there. It doesn't go further into the actual cooler, which is just kind of a shroud and the fan. But that fan is interesting. It's a blower fan, which has about 11 millimeters of pressure, which is kind of insane. This small unit equals about the same cooling efficiency of an H55. It doesn't have Corsair Link. It has a tiny freaking rad. It has really high fin density and a crazy fan, which equates to a pretty cool cooler, especially because this thing also mounts to the motherboard. It doesn't actually mount to the outside of the Bulldog, which it kind of looks like it does at first, but it does not, meaning that if they want to, and I've seen some expression that they might, they could sell this off by itself, and a lot of cases have venting just over the I/O, so this could work in pretty much whatever you want. Pretty effective little cooler, and a very low profile. Another thing to note about this CPU cooler is that you will need relatively low profile RAM, as it's fairly all-encompassing over the motherboard. Across from the CPU cooler, you can see Corsair Link, which is obviously not required and doesn't actually come with Corsair's bare-bones system, but you could add in yourself, and then the SF600 watt power supply. This is interesting. This is Corsair's first foray into SFX power supplies, and at 600 watts, which is not a low wattage at all. Pretty badass, and this little guy will be definitely sold on its own, so if you're looking into home theater PCs, you can stay tuned for that. In the more vertical upper part of the rest of the case, you have your drive mounting. Now here you can have 3 SSDs or 1 SSD and a hard drive, so you'd be available to have essentially probably one fairly insane SSD array, or an SSD for your operating system and some programs, and a hard drive for like your bigger files and whatnot. Just below that, as you can now see, we have the graphics card, which is actually cooled by an H55, which is something quite unique about this case. A lot of home theater PCs don't exactly have options for water cooling a graphics card. A lot of home theater PCs don't really have a lot of options in terms of water cooling at all. And in this one, you can water cool the CPU and GPU. Now, this is using Corsair's graphics card mounting system. You could use whatever you want, but definitely not a bad idea. Another thing to note is to kind of ignore those 2 included fans. They're there, and they'll be that size, but they'll maybe not be exactly the same. I can't really say any more than that for now. Just hang with me on that one. So the CPU is cooled by a super interesting new CPU cooler with 150 watt TDP, a blower style fan, and a tiny little rad with really dense fins, which is a really interesting configuration. The graphics card is cooled in a home theater box. There's tons of mesh all over the place. There's 2 intakes for dedicated fans. There's this new power supply from them. What's the point? What's the theme? Well, the outside's ugly, so we're going to ignore that for now. The whole theme behind this is cooling. This is a crazy amount of cooling for a home theater box, and a lot more than I expected coming into it. But does it matter? Recently, we released a video of a tiny little home theater box that we fit a 16-core CPU, which is hyper-threaded into it, I think 64 gigs of RAM and a Titan X, and the temperatures were fine. Well, not necessarily. The Titan X was fairly hot because the Titan X is a fairly hot card, so this could solve that problem. Also, it was fairly quiet, but it wasn't the quietest machine out there. In this guy, everything from Corsair, including the graphics card cooler, is under 30 dBs, which is pretty damn good. Last but not least, it has a shielded riser cable for that graphics card, so it's able to sit flat alongside the motherboard, and that will be in black, not the weird blue it currently is. Speaking of the change there will be quite a few changes to the inside of this, not just the outside. And with that, what do I think of the Bulldog? I don't usually give opinions from events, as I don't think it's necessarily the greatest idea, but in its current state, I'm not necessarily a huge fan, mainly due to aesthetics, but that's going to change. There's some internal things that are going to change as well. I think this is going to be an extremely important product, if nothing else. Home theater is a really interesting segment and something that's growing with stuff like Steambox coming out, Steam machines and all that kind of stuff. And there's been a few players in the space for a while now, but Corsair seems to come into segments and just make them absolutely explode. Look at the all-in-one water cooling segment. It existed, and then Corsair came around, and now it's freaking huge. Will they be able to do the same with home theater PCs? Let me know in the comments down below or on Twitter at Luke_LAFR. Thanks a ton to MSI for sending us here this year. We would definitely not be in Taiwan right now if it wasn't for them. So check out their bit.ly link in the description down below this video to see all the products that they're launching at Computex this year. We'll hopefully be checking those out shortly, so we'll have videos on them coming soon. Also, thank you to lynda.com. Check out their link, lynda.com/Computex, for a 10-day free trial and start learning stuff right away. While you're commenting on what you think about the Bulldog, like the video, dislike the video, favorite the video, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Thanks for watching. Stay subscribed to Linus Tech Tips if you want to see all the rest of our Computex 2015 content, and I'll see you guys next time.